You have to record an intro or something.
Yeah. My animation skills up to par. Tuesday night. Now streaming live.
All right, all yours.
All right, I'm calling this meeting to order.
At 4:31.
And our first agenda item is if there's any public comment ahead of the meeting today. Hearing none.
We don't have anyone other than expected people. So
hearing none, approval of the minutes from our last meeting on July 21st. I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, staff update.
I actually will let Jeff do it because I think the only thing to really talk about much is the heating system at Public Works.
So yeah, thank you. The heating system at Public Works, we put out a request for bids. We've met with 3 contractors. Basically what we've asked for is, I think I went over this briefly last time, but we've asked for a like replacement quote, and then we've asked for some suggestions and improvements of what's the term I'm looking for?
Recovering the temperature.
Thank you.
Space, yeah.
For recovery units. Yeah, we have received 1 bid back, or 1 quote back rather. We're expecting 1 more this week. Well, we were expecting the other 2 last week, but I think in reality we're gonna get 1 this week, and hopefully 1 next week. And then you and I will sit down and I guess look at the quotes. You can help me make sense of it, and then we'll probably go to Mark and talk over the next steps, I guess. But that's really all we have for an update right now. It's the process a little bit slower than what we had hoped, but I guess probably to be expected.
And that's it.
All right, thanks for that update. I think we can strike that item from the old business section of the agenda.
Yeah.
All right. First order of old business is our battery ordinance, and we'll do our working session with the Vermont Law and Graduate School folks that have joined today. So I'll turn it over to you, Kurt, to introduce the topic.
Sounds good. So if you all have it, that's great. Otherwise I could pull it up. Maybe I guess.
You should be able to share if you want, Kurt.
Yeah, maybe that's worth it. So yeah, I mean, as I explained in the email, what we did was we looked at I think it's like section 60.19, which is your solar section, which, it's a bylaw, and you would hope everything in there is consistent, but that was formatted a bit differently than your wind section. So we just kind of tried to do the best we could to make it look like a section in the Topsham zoning code. So that's why, we put in Article 7, because it seemed like that's a good spot. And that's why it's called 60.20, because it's right after the last subsection, which was your solar. And then we, use that as our outline, looked at what you guys had done already, and tried to put those references in the Constitution and the purpose and intent, and use some of that language. And then really looked at the three model bylaws that are out there in New England right now and kind of put together. I mean, really what I did was I just threw what I liked out of those into this and then added a bunch of stuff that we thought was important to add and then came up with what you see. It's a draft, as I think we talked about on the last call. It's probably going to go through 4 or 5 iterations before it's ready to share. But I think it's pretty logical. As I mentioned in the email, the sizing and how you want to regulate the different sizes along with some of the bylaws exempted certain uses, meaning like co-located battery storage, meaning battery storage next to solar was often treated, no matter what size it was, as like a tier 1. It was going to just go through building and electrical, but I'm just kind of just giving you an example of something we might want to talk about. Like I'm not sure, one, that should be the case uh, always. One of the reasons is I don't think co-locating stuff next to an electrical substation should give people an out, meaning that they should just have to go for building electrical. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. The other thing is because the battery tax credit is still in place, I can tell you that a lot of solar developers are trying to stay in business by figuring out how big a battery they can put on a solar site so that they can get the tax credit sort of for the entire thing. They're actively trying to figure out how to game the tax credit by putting a bigger battery on and getting more of a tax credit for the overall site. So I'm not sure. We're not going to see, traditionally on like a 2 MW solar project, you'd see like I don't know, like a 500 kW battery. But I think you're going to start to see like 2 MW solar sites and 5 MW batteries because they need more of that project cost to be taken care of with the tax credit. So I think we need to be careful about that. And also we have to distinguish between so there's existing solar, and I don't know if there's existing standalone solar in town, but adding batteries to that, or are we talking about new solar going up and batteries going to that, or if we should even distinguish between the two? So those were the types of questions I was kind of going over in my head. And then also just generally how they divided the batteries up. And just so folks understand, like batteries are often referred to by I'll refer to like a battery as a 5 MW battery, but some people will refer to them in megawatt hours. And all that is, if you have a 5 MW battery that has a 2-hour dispatch capability, that's a 10 MWh battery. Now, if that same 5-hour battery is newer and has a 4-hour dispatch, that's a 20 MWh battery. So that's kind of what 250 kWh and 10, that's how you translate that to megawatts or kilowatts. And the reason I think I like the kilowatt hour, megawatt hour approach is it's a little bit more conservative. So for instance, if you're in tier 3 and you've got a 10 MWh battery, that could either be a 5 MW 2-hour battery, or it could be a 2.5 MW 4-hour battery. It kind of covers both. But the question also I had, and maybe I'll stop and we should start and take comments on this. Maybe this last thing here is, do we want to are those the appropriate size classifications? Or do we want tier 3, which is going to trigger, say, no matter what, a conditional use permit and site plan review? Do we want to have that be bigger, like utility scale size batteries? So they would be more in the you know, 100 megawatt hour or 200 megawatt hour range, or do we want to take a close look at everything, you know, over 10 megawatt hours? We want to be battery friendly, but we don't want to be too permissive, I guess. So those are some of the questions that I was thinking about as I was looking at the other bylaws that they didn't really go into.
So I have
If
a
I'm-
quick question.
Yep.
So for projects that we're not requiring the conditional use permit, those will just be subject to building and electrical codes.
Some of them will just be building electrical. Yeah, they'd be like a permitted as of right in the zoning table, in the table of uses. I don't even know if that's just a P or, but yeah, those would be a P, but then there could be a category of batteries, say maybe tier twos that are building tied that have to go through site plan review, you know, that are not building tied, that are, you know, so you're talking about a standalone 2 megawatt battery that has to go through a lesser process, you know, they're not going to be worried about being turned down, but they also have to check all the boxes in site plan review, like the screening requirements and the habitat and the siting requirements that are in site plan review now. They would still have to make sure they meet those. So that's kind of the second tier. Then there'd be the bigger ones, which are the conditional use permits, which give the planning board more leeway to say no or to tie, you know, to get creative with conditions.
Do we think that the current site plan requirements are sufficient for the tier two size projects? I mean, I think from my point of view, it's like we want to make sure that these projects are safe. There's a good plan for decommissioning.
Right.
They're properly screened and not noisy. Like so I don't have a good sense personally of at what size does a battery project get to be big enough that our typical site plan requirements aren't going to cut it and are going, you know, that type of project will potentially negatively impact the community or need to be decommissioned in an expensive way. And we're worried that a developer wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a good point. And one of the things in this section, I wasn't sure if these should be submission requirements for conditional use or site plan review. And I think we could make them for site plan review. So I tried to add stuff that wasn't in your site plan review, you know, checklist. And a lot of that's in there. So, you know, and some of it, you know, is duplicative, and we're going to go through, Josie and Antonia will go through, and because your site plan review is pretty thorough. Like they talk a lot about habitat, a lot about, and they use all the right terminology, that Maine terminology. So I do want to go through and just clean up our requirements, but we do require things, you know, like I'm interested, for instance, in why are they putting the battery there? Is it backup? Is this a state program? Is it primarily to dispatch in the summer? Like, what are the benefits for Topsham? Like, I just want them to be truthful to the board, you know, and not come in and be like, well, this is great. We're going to be taking renewable power and collecting it during the day. And it's like, I'd be real, just tell us what it's for so we have an idea of when this is going to be dispatching. You know, estimation of tax revenue, any host or good neighbor agreements, description of efforts to use local labor. And then I took a lot of this engineering and safety language from the other bylaws, but like some of this stuff, the boundary survey language, that's all in site plan review now. Like,
Can I jump in for a minute, Kurt?
what's that?
Can I jump in for a minute?
Sure.
Two things. One is we've just had a gentleman come in who's a member of the public, but actually lives
In Topsham.
in near the Bissett Farm, right?
Yes, I do.
It's
Well, right behind you. Yeah.
Stephanie's neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you have engineering experience in this too?
Yeah, I've been in the electric utility business for 37 years.
Okay.
I started as a substation engineer.
Okay.
And we do a lot of these types of projects. I'm very familiar with them.
So he may jump in and ask questions at some point, Stephanie, if that's okay, as we go through. Is that?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that is, you know, great. Yeah, the really technical utility scale stuff is not my area of expertise. So chime in whenever. But just the different reports you can see we're asking for. Like, to be honest with you, everybody asks for electrical drawings. Planning boards aren't capable of, they're mostly for the utility, but why not? Same with spec sheets. But like, yeah, the noise, and we do have a noise study we make them do. Oh, and by the way, before I even go through this stuff, just keep in mind this section here, and this covers the whole thing, that you can hire anybody to review any section of the application, any professional to review this at the applicant's expense. So that was sort of a blanket statement I made up front, in case you're like, we need help with this, you can hire someone to look at the drawings or someone to look at their safety specs or their safety report. But, the noise, the visual impact, and then these go into greater detail at the bottom. We actually ask for reports.
Excuse me, Kurt,
Yes.
if I may. I'm sorry to hopefully not backtrack us too much. As this is written currently, is our tier 1 batteries currently just building an electrical code?
Yep.
And then presumably there's some difference between tier 2 and tier 3 batteries, which are perhaps both require planning board review, but there's additional documentation for one versus the other.
Yeah, and that's something, we need to think about. Like, so you're going to go through, and this is more suited for you all and probably at the select board to decide like how you're going to fill this table up, at the bottom.
So could I put something out there that everybody could slap around and say, is it fair to say that, for instance, if I'm a homeowner putting in a Tesla Powerwall, that I would definitely want to be in tier 1. I shouldn't have to go to the planning board or do special permitting.
Yep.
And then if I'm not putting in, for example, Tesla Powerwalls in my house, what are we then into the transmission or distribution type battery systems?
Do people ever consider, Kurt, that it's gonna be used on premises? Let's say you had a small manufacturing facility.
Yes.
They had the battery, but it was not gonna be discharged to the grid. It was all gonna be used there. Could that be our tier 2? But as soon as
the way the other bylaws did it, what they called those building integrated battery energy storage, which is a battery installed within, on, or directly adjacent to an existing primary building or structure, and that the system is designed to serve.
Okay.
So that's what you're talking about, and that could be for like, manufacturer or a commercial enterprise that's going to be above 250 kWh. So it might take them out of tier 1 and put them into tier 2, but they might also we could say for those, go ahead and just get your building electrical or something like that, or go through site plan review. But we get it. This is exactly what batteries are good for. That's up to you, but there is a category that sort of covers that.
I think you make a good point that I don't think we necessarily want to give too much credit just for co-location. Because our biggest reason for this ordinance is to try to have neighbors of the facilities feel comfortable with them.
Right.
And if we're skipping the review just because it happens to be a solar farm, I think we aren't going to get the comfort from neighbors that would want. So.
Yeah, and again, it's like, ideally, a utility scale battery is going to be next to a substation that's got like the right connection point in it, like an open bus bay right next to it, right in it. But they shouldn't get a pass, because they're co-located. That's good for what's going to save them millions of dollars, but they should still go through. If it's a big one, if it's a tier 3, they should still go through, the conditional use permit process.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, we can sort of fine tune this, but I think the general theory is tier ones, the small ones, the household ones, um, are tier ones, and they should be just go building electrical permit. Tier twos, um, maybe go through site plan review, and then tier threes, conditional use permits, and we can tweak the numbers, but within all that, maybe the building integrated battery storage, like no matter what, even if you're in tier two, we could say site plan review only. And then we can decide whether or not we want to give, how we want to treat co-located, or we can just take that out, I mean, in theory, you kind of want batteries to be next to solar for obvious reasons, but like, I mean, I don't know.
And we're not saying they can't be, we're just saying they still have to follow all the
Right.
restrictions for the battery thing, whether or not they're.
Maybe like you say, all right, tier twos can go through tier two co-locateds, site plan review only, but tier threes, no matter what, you got to get a conditional use permit. It's just going to be too big. And we want to see some safety measures put in there.
I guess I'm struggling as to how co-located relates to anything having to do with a review itself. So what if like,
Let's say Hannaford needed batteries, instead of having a big generator, they want to have batteries to. cover
That's a
them.
building, that'd be a building integrated. Yeah. So the co-located, what that is policy people at the state saying we want to encourage batteries in spots where they make sense, like next to substations, other generators, and solar. So let's be gentle as a policy and try to have them there. And that's may not necessarily be good for you all, though, when
right,
you're
I
thinking
don't,
about.
yeah, I
So
don't
that's
think that
something.
really helps with noise or fire
Right.
safety or any of these things that a town person may care about.
So
Right.
building integrated is never co-located, it's a completely separate.
That's right.
category.
That's
Okay.
different. I listen, I mean, I think there's a good argument to take out co-located. Because if it's tier one, it's small, you're never going to see it. If it's tier two, it's going to be small, and the solar is going to be small. So maybe it's going to be site plan review, but never, co-located for a tier three just shouldn't exist. So we could talk about it, but that's kind of the way the other states had gone. But again, this was state policy people, not land use people. Not worried about noise and safety. They're worried about just logically where they'd like to see these things go. So that's, we're getting into the meat, which is like where we want these things. And then don't forget, once you get to the table itself, you can just drop a big fat N, a not permitted, not even a conditional use permit in the residential zones for tier threes. You can even get more restrictive or more this is kind of where the meat is, right, in the summary table. But I don't know enough about the town to make some guesses about filling it out. So I'm like, I just threw it in there because just as a reminder that even if you are a tier two in site plan review, you might decide in the R1 zone you just don't want them there, maybe not. Maybe those are,
I think we took a stab at some of this a little bit right as we were starting, and we kind of spun our wheels as
yeah.
far as, do we want to restrict it in certain places? Does it matter as long
Yeah,
as
because we talk about conditional use permits, but not all tier threes are going to get to go through the conditional use permit. You might say no in the R1, 2, 3 for tier threes. So they're not getting anything. They'd have to come and try to change the bylaw, to put a battery there, a big
Although
battery.
the proposal we had that started all this was in the R3, I believe. So
Right. So that might be like, conditional use permit, and again, that might be, that might force you to look back at the sizes and be like, you know what, let's up the tier two to 20 megawatt hours, because those are 5 megawatt batteries these days, and 5 megawatt batteries take like their footprint's like 10,000 square feet. It's not huge. So we're okay going a little bigger on tier 2, and then, but the tier 3s, we want those to go through. Don't want them in 1s and 2s in the R zone, but in the 3s and everything else, they're gotta do conditional use permit, You might want to tweak the numbers.
And do you have a feel for what, for example, a 250 kilowatt hour battery? Because in my mind, my CMP bill, I think in the middle of winter when I'm heating with heat pumps, I use maybe 1,100 kilowatt hours in a month. So does that
Yeah,
mean I could run my house for a week on that size battery?
no, that's the
Okay.
thing about batteries. That I'm looking at I'm actually I'm not texting here. I'm looking online to see what my Tesla Powerwall size is. But so I've
Yeah,
got I
I
think I've
saw.
got five. I've got a 5 kW solar array. I've got 2 Tesla Powerwalls, and I'm gonna guess that they are. Where is this? 20 kWh batteries
I
total.
saw. Yeah.
They're tiny. And if my power went out and I didn't want to change how I live, say I wanted to keep my AC going, keep everything going, in theory, it would probably last like 3 or 4 hours. But you're only gonna get a week out of a battery if you shut your entire house down, but for like your refrigerator and like your phone and laptop charging stations. They're not meant for. The myth about batteries right now is they're not long-term durational. Long-term durational batteries are still being invented. These are short-term. These are 2 to 4 hour full dispatch. That's it. Think about it like an RV or a sailboat. When you're RVing and you're off grid, you're shutting everything down to prolong that battery life, that lead acid battery life, and that's the way you run a house on a battery right now. Um, there's a lot of new technology out there, but none of it is really commercially available in the long durational battery storage world. So 250 kWh you'll never see on a house, I don't think. You'll see that. That's more like, you're going to see that more in small businesses and stuff. Where
So
is
the
it?
Mission Clean Energy proposal, I think that project was going to be 300 megawatt. Um,
I think that was a 200 megawatt project, so it might have been like 400 or 800 megawatt hours. Unless I'm thinking of the one in Blandford they were proposing. I know that one was a 200 megawatt one.
yeah, I think this one was even bigger, and they were saying it was going to be like 300 shipping containers.
Yeah.
So that made me think a 1 megawatt battery is the size of a shipping container.
Um, I don't. Maybe a 20-foot shipping container. Not a
Yeah,
40.
like the back of a semi truck.
Yeah, like a shorter one, not a 40-footer, but like a 20-footer, maybe, I think. I could look at the pictures I have from a site we have in Massachusetts has been doing this for a long time. It used to be everything over 500 kW, every solar facility over 500 kW had to have a battery. And now I think it's everything over a megawatt. But I've got a few sites that have batteries on them. I could figure out how big they are and take some pictures this weekend actually to show you what they look like. Some of them, but I mean the size anyway. But I'm thinking the ones in New Marlborough, Mass, we have. I think those are megawatt. That's a megawatt, and it's not a 40-foot shipping container. It's more like a 20-foot, and they look a little bit prettier. They're just racks of cells and batteries for the most part.
So the other bylaws that I assume you were looking at Massachusetts, New York,
Yep.
and who else? You said there were
Rhode
maybe
Island.
three. Oh, Rhode Island. So what do they typically say is conditional use versus time versus site plan?
Um, I don't know if they went into where, though that this was the size. I took these sizes from, I think Massachusetts and New York both use this exact
This
same.
size.
Yeah. But, and they do make sense. I mean, I guess the question is if somebody comes in with a 2 mega, yeah, I mean, a 10 megawatt hour battery would be 2 to, you could be up, let's just assume that most batteries are 4-hour batteries. So you're looking at a 2.5 megawatt battery that could be in tier 2. And if it's standalone and we say, but again, remember it blends with the use table. So you could say a tier 2, you could create all these different uses like I put down here. And you could say, all right, so a tier 2 non-building integrated, a tier 2 could be an N here, site plan review here, CUP here, CUP here, and then in the municipal and industrial zones, site plan review only. You could make it go through a conditional use permit in the 2 residential zones to protect yourself. So you can't really separate this table from those categories. They kind of,
I think that's a good idea. And
Yeah.
probably just, maybe the only place you can do it without the higher standard being the industrial zone.
right. So your tier 2s could be a little bit more permissive in some zones, but not in others. And your tier 3s might be more Ns and CUPs everywhere. It kind of, there was a battery proposed in Vergennes, Vermont, like a month ago, and it got shot down by the town because it was in the industrial zone, seemingly great, but it was right next to the residential zone. And the people in the residential zone were like, no, we don't want this thing here. It was a 5 megawatt, 20 megawatt hour battery. And I mean, the developer bailed, but I think they bailed probably for other reasons than to please the town. But so you run into, it's an imperfect system, but so even if you allow it in the industrial zone for site plan review or something, a tier 2, because that's where you want them, you might run into trouble still, and people might be mad because because the town doesn't really have the ability to say no in site plan review. It's more of as long as you check the boxes, we call it like a ministerial permit. You get your permit. You get site plan review as long as you meet the requirements of site plan review. Whereas a conditional use permit, if you look at your conditional use permit section in your code, there's like 5 or 6 relatively vague things that they have to meet. Like they have to fit in with the character of the neighborhood. They have to, and that gives the planning board the right to say no. You don't fit in. Whereas site plan review, developers love site plan review, even if it's hard to get through. At least they know what they have to do, But, I think if you look at the definitions and you start to think about where you want these, and again, at the end of the day, there's going to be some holes in some areas of town. Because when zones were made, and I don't know when you last did your zoning map, but some of the industrial zones in a lot of these small New England towns are just not really made for industrial uses anymore. I mean, I've got towns in Massachusetts where the industrial zones still run along the rivers and railroads,
That's ours.
Yeah.
And it's mostly occupied by a gravel pit and a metal recycling facility that shreds cars and things.
Yeah. It's a mess.
Right. And we're thinking like, not just for you all, but for putting together, like we're hoping to take this and make it like a model bylaw with teeth for other towns in Maine and in Vermont Vermont, they'd go to the state, but in New Hampshire to look at and use. So we're being a little bit like, if you only have 2 industrial areas and you can sit there and be like, well, there's really nothing around them that would be offended by a tier 3. So let's make them, site plan review in the I zone and then conditional use permits everywhere else and ends in the R zones, meaning no, not allowed. And that's a really, unless in the R3 zone, because as we talked about, it has more ag and that might be a better spot for them, but they should still go through conditional use permit. But
I don't think we have any zone that would not want to have the conditional use, because even our industrial zone, we had a batch plant that wanted to move into it and it got fought because of a neighborhood relatively close. So
right. But yeah, so that's something to really think about, and we could definitely make an attempt. But I would put some thought into that, looking at, so you've got your 3 sizes, And then you've got your other category, which is building integrated. And you might see, so you're going to have like 3 or 4 new uses in your use table. One of them, tier 1, anything tier 1. Then you're going to have tier 2, call it standalone. Then you're going to have tier 2 building integrated. Then you're going to have tier 3 standalone. Then you're going to have and we could have a tier 3 building integrated. I don't think that's likely, but and then as we talked about, we might just want to strike the co-located because from a policy standpoint, sure, that makes sense, but from a land use sort of worrying about noise and stuff, I mean, you don't necessarily want these things next to solar as a town, whereas the state would love it. And again, as I said, I don't think it makes any sense that you give batteries a pass that are next to substations. That's just good for them.
I think unless people in the committee feel otherwise, I feel like we should just take out the co-located altogether.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
I agree
And,
with that.
and it doesn't mean if they come in and say, we want to put a 10 megawatt hour battery next to the solar facility we built, you just go through a conditional use permit, and if you like it, you like it. It's not like, and I tried to build in flexibility, to some of these things where, for instance, here, I need to look at the height. There's not a lot of controversy around battery heights. It's not like wind or anything like that, but I gave you the discretion of the board to lower height standards if they're next to a neighborhood and they want to see them. They don't want to see them at all above the trees. If they're 10 feet high and the shrubs are 6 feet high, so they have a chance to lower. I tried to build, here too, the setbacks. Like we need, and I have a note for Josie and Antonio here, like the setbacks, my understanding is towns, whether it's rational or not, because of their fear of like this runaway fire situation in batteries, they want significant setbacks, not just from property lines, but from other structures. And to me, like 50 feet doesn't quite do it. But we're going to double check because again, the policy documents, the state created model bylaws I don't think they're thinking of the same things you guys might be. And again, the clearance between equipment, I said a note, it seems too close. Like we want them to put up a wall, maybe a fence, and we want them to put up shrubs because we don't want to look at them. So that can be close. We don't care if they burn, but anything else I think should be way more than 10 feet away. I think it should be 200 feet away, but we need to check. I can't just, my experience is I had a site in Connecticut. It was 6 acres. It was next to the University of Connecticut wastewater treatment plant and their transfer station. It was an old brownfield, and it was next to their substation. And I tried to get a battery to go there. It's now going to be a 1 megawatt solar field, but I was told by battery developers, good ones, and I try to say, listen, the state's fine with it. The university's fine with it. I've run it by the town. They're like, we need 15 acres. We don't want 5. Again, we could fit it on 4, but we really want to have a lot of separation between us and anything else because we run into all sorts of difficulties with fire departments, with fire codes, with neighbors, even if I didn't have any neighbors. But so that was my memory. Like my 5-acre site that easily could have fit a 50 megawatt battery was never worked out because even the developers are like towns in Texas and California are insisting on huge setbacks. So we'll check that for you. That's on us.
I think that's good, Kurt, and I think that's kind of the same things our fire department was talking about. So
Right.
we like your thoughts on that. But can I turn it over to our guest for a minute because he's got a comment regarding the height?
Yeah, just Kurt on the height, and I'm going to refer or just think about the one that they were looking to put in here recently, and they were connecting to the system at 300 megawatts at 345 kV.
Right.
The battery storage is probably going to be 10, 12 feet high. Those
Right.
345 dead ends are about 140 feet high each.
Yeah,
And you have a minimum of probably 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 dead ends. There's no way you're screening them.
Right. right.
So,
Yeah, no, that's
the
true.
thing is,
And
it's
you
not
know,
a problem, I don't think.
and you know, we do, and that's, you know, that's as you know, that's like the biggest line in New England. That's the backbone of the grid. And they were going for scale. You know, they wanted to put the biggest project they could get on the biggest line, and it just didn't work out. As I said, that was an interconnection number they got. That had nothing to do with you guys. But you know, that being said, and we don't have to go
115, a 115 connection would be 80 feet high.
right. And then even the small distribution lines, you're looking at poles. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the utility is probably going to want at least 2 or 3 new telephone poles put in that are going to be about 45 feet high to hold some of their equipment above ground. So there's not much you can do.
That's on a distribution circuit. Yeah, you'd have something like that, probably a 40 or 50 foot, 45, 50 foot pole going out with things mounted on it. But the substations, when we were talking about this, I don't think people realize how large these things are at 345. They're very big. You won't screen it.
Yeah, and you know, we do have a sentence in here that tries to minimize the above ground stuff, but as you know, there's only certain things, and I put reasonably possible. That was our language, because if they have a lot of bedrock and stuff, you know, they might be able to do something different on site. But there are going to be poles. There's going to be, to connect to the grid at either the DG's, you know, size, or the 115 or 345 size. You're going to have. It's a good thing to think about. You are going to have those new telephone poles with wires and equipment on them.
I don't think the distribution will be as bad if you
No.
can get a connection to the distribution. But if you're connecting to the transmission like they were looking at, those yards are huge.
Yeah.
Bigger than the.
But it probably wouldn't be taller than the transmission lines that
Oh, yeah.
exist, right?
Yeah, no, they
No.
are.
No,
Oh, they
even
are?
the lines go through Bisson Farm right now, they'd be taller than that.
But the steel structures will be taller than that, yeah.
Wow.
Because you'll bring the lines into the lines, into the dead end, and then there'll be the static up over the top. And then they're gonna run the static to prevent lightning strikes inside the yard. So, yeah, they'll be about 140 feet high, big
Okay.
steel structures.
Holy
They're
moly.
very, very big structures.
And that's, you know, that's something to think about, you know, when you're deciding what zone you know, you might have an N in the R1 and an N in the R2 for tier 3s, and just, or, you know, I don't want to get too complicated. You could create a separate tier 4, which is like, you know, literally utility or transmission tied batteries. And that could be like N, except in these zones, it's going to be conditional use permit. And in those zones, when you go through the conditional use permitting process, you know, we should make a note of that, Josie. We should make sure in the conditional use, the extra stuff we want to add to the conditional use permit, that we talk directly to this idea of poles. Because sometimes in those site plans that you review, it's not quite clear that along with the solar project or the battery project, it comes with it like some really big towers. So we want to make sure we call that out, and they've got to call that out specifically, like literally how tall and how many. They'll put it in the site plan, but it's going to be buried, you know, in a little legend somewhere. But we want to make sure we call that out as an ask.
Yeah, correct. And it kind of along similar lines is, again, when you and I just skimming through it, but like the noise we talk about. I know it talks about the noise of the battery and the HVAC units for that. The power transformer is going to be a lot louder than any of those units. That runs 24/7, and that noise sometimes doesn't just permeate through the air. At the Pownell substation just down the road here, CMP back in the 90s had to lift it up and put large rubber pads under it and an acoustic building around it, because it was actually, the sound was permeating through the ground to the residents' homes, and it was very expensive. So the batteries themselves, like I noticed that study that they had up, that they showed real quick, they looked at the units. Well, that's great, but that's going to be your sound source. It's
Right.
big.
So
Yeah, Kurt, can you navigate to the best definition? And can we just make sure that the best definition is comprehensive enough, or we need to add another definition that considers a ancillary equipment.
Or the substation, is what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you'll-
we'll beef this up, and we'll, I'm just gonna put, we'll figure out all the right language to put in here. And I just made a note too down here when we talk about sound. And again, this was another note to myself, like 60 dBA seems high. I think I'm used to dBAs from solar being in the 50s, but this comes from the States, but we want to check. And then I just want to make sure I threw in something here on my own, that it shouldn't increase background levels. I was at a site on Saturday in a very small town in Western Mass, and you couldn't hear a thing. It was beautiful, but the problem was the Old Town landfill happened to be on their dirt road, and a solar system was going up, and people were upset, even though it's a perfect spot. It's on an old landfill, but it was the noise. They were like, "We don't hear anything." He's like, "Stop, listen, we don't hear anything." So my point with adding that is the battery storage shouldn't ever be above what's there now. And we have to figure out a way to blend that with that first sentence that actually has a dBA rating. And including at night, don't forget, because unlike solar, at night, often things quiet down a lot. And unlike solar, batteries might be dispatching at night. And I don't know, whether that's noisier than storing, but if you're going to have HVAC equipment humming and maybe a transformer humming at night in an otherwise quiet neighborhood now, we got to be conscious of that and make sure they cite that in a way that people can't hear it. Which should be,
We've got a
I'm
marijuana
guessing it
state.
shouldn't be hard, but we just have to make sure they do it because developers are cheap and they'll cut corners if we allow them to.
I think we've got a marijuana standard that's similar to what you've got for the noise. That basically you can't smell it past your property border. So if you can't hear it past your property border, that would be consistent.
Yeah.
Maximum building heights apply to utilities.
And I did put in that thing about you can require, or not just as a condition of approval, but when, my point is, I gave you that example of an inverter making a lot of noise in like year 9. No one could hear it, and all of a sudden it started to hum, and people started to freak out, and it was because it was malfunctioning. So I'm going to make a note here that you want to have as a planning board anytime during commercial operations the right to make the owner do a noise study and to fix the problem. Not just because if you forget it during the conditional approval, the CUP process, you still want to maintain that right.
The noise study needs to also include the transformers and et cetera, right?
Yes, and I put that note up here too.
So that'll apply to B.
Yep.
Okay.
Not just the ancillary equipment, but we call out specifically the transformers, and we'll call out. I like using the word et cetera. Most lawyers don't.
Yeah.
Get away with using the word et cetera in a bylaw, it'd be great. We'll just say including but not limited to, or something like that. Transformers, inverters, things like that. But yeah, so the reports we're going to require, these were largely taken from the model bylaws. We need to double check all of these ULs and make sure the states had them down correctly. You might want to take, I largely took the emergency operations and safety plan. I mean, listen, if I were you guys and I were or the planning board and I were looking at a big battery and looking at an operations and safety plan, I'd probably hire a third party to review it for me.
Yeah, Kurt, if I could just jump in on that, I don't know if it goes with this area, but again, I just looking at that one plan, but just thinking out that, to access a site like some of these big battery storage sites, you've got 400, 500 foot road going in there.
Right.
I think somewhere we want to stipulate that the road's got to not only be accessible to the emergency vehicles, but there's got to be turnaround points for those vehicles to get turned around once they're in there. I know, like in Texas on these large solar farms, I think it was every 150 or 200 feet, we had to put a turnaround for an emergency vehicle. And I'm just thinking, once those guys get in there, you don't want them, if something happens, you don't want them trying to back 500 feet back out to a road. They gotta be able to
Yeah, that's a
turn.
good point. Yep. No, that should be listed as something they have to do, which is, you know, the road has to be able to handle, not just be wide enough and have like that hammerhead turnaround in various spots, but it's got to have the weight capability. And I even asked him like they might, it would be nice if there was a water supply on site for some of these bigger ones, so that if the fire trucks ran out of water, they would have a hydrant right there, you know. So I put that in. We can fine tune this language, the location of any new fire hydrants, and make it, you know, make it so the planning board draws attention to that and maybe requires it for the bigger ones.
Who plows the road, Kurt?
So they would plow the road, and I did see that was covered in.
Yeah, it
That
mentioned snow removal.
Yeah, there was in here site access. So this might be, we'll have to see whether this is a good section. Site access shall be maintained. You know, let's beef that up a little bit. Like, you know,
Yeah, what does that mean?
yeah.
Potholes can't be a depth of more than 3 inches or something?
Yeah, fire trucks have to be able to access it, you know, 24/7, 365 or something like that. We'll figure out the right language. But yeah, because they won't, I mean, in solar, as you probably know, they don't plow. You know, they'll leave it covered in snow. And if for some reason there's a, you know, an inverter down or something that they have to go fix, they'll plow then. But their attitude is like, it's not worth it. But for I don't know, we might not even have, we just might, this is, yeah, we might just make everybody do it, you know, for tier 2s and 3s. Anybody, depending on, you know, whether we require all this information for site plan review, or I think we probably should. All we're asking is for information. That they should, you know, why not? Just plow your road, you know, keep it in
In that-
decent shape.
So
Even
in
if it's a
that,
1 megawatt battery, a shipping container, why not just keep it in shape, you know?
does that stipulate the developer specifically though? Or in the example of the Bisson Farm where the developer's leasing the property from Bisson,
Yeah,
is that something where Bisson's got to work it out?
I think we make the owner do it, and that would be helpful to the landowner, because that's often something not spelled out in a lease. And I've been around long enough to see landowners and solar companies in particular arguing about who's responsible for
Yeah.
plowing the road, and the solar companies are like, we don't care, you know, we don't make any money in the winter anyway. So we'll spell it out that the owners have to maintain the road.
And they can negotiate it different in their lease if they want, you know, they can push the
Yeah, if
responsibility.
they want to take it over, but ultimately at the end of the day, if there's something wrong out there and a fire truck tries to get out there and it's not maintained, it's going to be on the owner, whether or not he's contracted that away with the landowner. He's going to have to answer to the town. So again, we got to go through all this, but decommissioning, I took a lot of the language from the model bylaws. The only, you know, I made sure that whatever they do, I mean, the key stuff is and we'll double check this. We want to make sure they remove everything, because the classic developer move will be like, well, do we have to remove the underground wire, the underground conduit? Like, who cares? It's buried, it's solid waste, it's not leaking. Yeah, I think you remove everything, and it's got to be regraded and everything's got to be replaced with like native seeds and vegetation. So that's
Kurt, if I may, just the only thing I would kind of maybe a question on that is, for instance, I'm going to just refer to that again, that same CMP was going to be required to put a switch yard in there at 345. They won't get rid of that yard when the battery goes away. I'd be shocked.
CMP being the power company.
Power company.
They would be the ones removing that.
You know what I mean? The batteries may go away and they may decommission the substation, but there's a part of the project that they aren't going to own anymore.
Right.
And I bet you're going to find, they'll probably say, no, we're using this now as part of our system. We're going to leave that there. So those towers will be there for.
I think from what the farmer told me, he had his agreement to lease land to Mission, whatever, but CMP was actually gonna own the switching station.
Yeah, they have to own it.
And actually, they were insisting they actually own the land too, they weren't, even though the farmer only wanted to lease it. So they're not really, I guess CMP wanted to build that, not the developer.
Yeah, the developer will have to pay for it, but CMP will build it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's gonna be built to their standards and that's the point of interconnect. But when the project goes away, I don't know how you'd make CMP say, well, now that that doesn't need to be there anymore. You have to take down these 100.
and really, you're not really decommissioning that.
No, you
Because
aren't.
that's still usable, it just might be attached.
Yeah, and I agree, the utility's
Visual's
gonna,
always gonna be there though. You know what I mean? It never goes away. Once it goes there, it stays.
yeah,
And they seem to reuse this stuff, like this is what the old Maine Yankee line they'd be using,
Yeah,
even
that's
though it
right, yeah.
doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
yeah, and I agree, like, that's something the utility's getting paid for, the developer is building it for, gonna pay for it, it's gonna be there, and the utility's not gonna wanna. So that's just something to keep in mind. I just made a note here, just because, decommissioning is sort of it's almost like a fictional thing right now. I don't know many things that have had to go through decommissioning through the bond process. So, the only, I added a liability insurance. They're going to have to show that in the lease, but I added a liability insurance provision. But this section here about the town drawing upon the surety, I think I want that spelled out. How does it work? And as we talked about, if it's annually renewable, we need to see the renewal to make sure it's there. But is this like an insurance policy? Like, do you call up the insurance company and give them evidence? Hey, the developer hasn't gotten back to us. It's been abandoned for 180 days. We've requested that they decommission according to their plan. They're not answering. Give us the money so we can do it. Like, how does that work? I don't think
Then we
anyone.
find out they didn't pay for the bond and we have nothing there.
That's right. That's right. That's why this is all like, we got to be really careful, that's why I put in this, that they've got to send the planning board to the town treasurer, and it's on them. It's not the town treasurer has to notify them it's due, like they have to send it. And, people are busy and these things are 10 years down the line. Is the town treasurer, the planning board going to have a calendar? I mean, that's the problem, right? That's the risk. These are going to be like single asset LLC.
I like your annual renewal, and I also think that we should get cancellation notices too. So if they don't pay the premium or something, so maybe in advance of it being actually canceled, maybe we have to get at least 60 days notice before it gets canceled, so we could claim on it if all of a sudden we've lost contact or something.
Right.
Yeah, the way that 3B reads right now, it makes it feel like, they could not renew. We're not going to find out about it until 30 days afterward. And then we have to wait another however many days until until we can claim it's abandoned.
Right.
So I would feel better about there being a clearer upfront, pool of money that the town has access to if the developer is not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And we give them options. I'm going to go against you here, but I'm adding bond because most of them are going to get what I think looks like an insurance policy. It's a surety bond. And that's because they pay like an insurance premium. So if it's $1 million decommissioning bond, they might only pay $5,000 a year, and they would much rather do that than post a letter of credit or cash, because that means that's money sitting that they can't use. But that's the most secure thing for the town. If they've got money in a town account and an escrow account or something that says, it's sitting there, you don't have to ask anybody permission. It could be. But they're going to fight that because that's a lot of money and they want to be able to use that on other projects. So they're going to want to do a bond, but we just got to make sure the bond is clear. It's not terminated. It's not canceled. And think like 15 years down the line with new people at town hall, volunteers on the planning board, forgetting to ask, forgetting this was a requirement, then all of a sudden, it's a single asset LLC, right? We should actually think about this as a.
And the project's been sold 3 times. along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked at renewable energy companies that fail and they stop paying all their bills,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and it's
And if you
like,
try to go after them, you can't go after the parent because they're protected by, corporate liability laws, and it's a single asset LLC. The only thing they owned was that battery, and it's not making money for them anymore. And yeah, they're gonna walk. And the only benefit you have is this surety bond that yeah, we got to be really careful on this and make sure. But again, on the flip side, if you could be gentle with them and be like, listen, we understand the market. In the first 5 years of this project, there's almost zero chance if you go out of business, somebody's not going to buy you out and continue operating this. It's a really low risk. So we're going to give you a pass in 5 years, but in year six, we want a cash deposit, or something like that. We don't want a bond. We want to, or we take some money in year six and you continue adding to it until the useful life of the project is done in year 20. There's ways to sort of be gentle with them, but still get that hard cash, which is kind of what you want. But we will work on this section for you and beef it up. And again, I also just want to understand how that works. Like they need to say, like, listen, we need to tell them how it works. Like it's got to be the town has the right to access this bond money, this insurance policy, period, within X number of days after it's not operating. And that's got to be a condition of the bond that you see they provide to the planning board and you sign off on. Because otherwise, I mean, do you need them to sign off on it? Do you need to get like, I don't know. It's like when um, I don't know, when you terminate a lease, like a commercial lease or something like that, and you want to show in your land use records that the lease is terminated, getting that tenant to actually sign a document for you so you can file it with the town it's hard. So you don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to do it on your own. If
I
they're
think Stephanie
put
makes
up
a good
cash.
point that when you draft the time periods, we want it such that whatever presumption of closing because of however many days they haven't stored electricity or released or whatever
Right.
comes before the time that they have the ability, the bonding company has the ability to cancel the bond for non-payment, and we have some notice before and stuff. So we have a chance to claim if we need to.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I'm acting too much like a lawyer, but what does discontinued operation mean? If I'm a smart owner operator, I'm going to be like, no, 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 no. I put some power onto the grid. My 180 isn't, but you're not really, we need to really kind of define what it means to be abandoned. Maybe like a notice with no response or something like that. Like, hey, we notice, your facility's not operating. We're going to consider you abandoned unless you prove to us otherwise. We should probably put something like else because you're just going to get into like a long, protracted fight if they try to deny it's been abandoned with a lawyer. So we'll try to make that really clear.
Do these companies have to bid to ISO New England to supply battery storage or something? Is that how it works?
It depends. I mean, like the big ones in Maine are yeah, they do have access to the wholesale markets. And they also will probably get some incentives from the state of Maine. So they get wholesale pricing and they get capacity payments and then they get something from the state. And then up front, they get that big fat tax credit of like 30% of their cost. So on the distributed side, the reason you're seeing a lot of this stuff happen is because previously you couldn't sell to ISO New England unless you were connected to a 115 kV line or higher. They don't see ISO New England doesn't see anything below that. But FERC changed the rules and said you have to allow battery storage on distribution lines to sell in the wholesale markets. And that's why you're seeing activity in Rhode Island, Connecticut, probably Maine soon with these smaller batteries on DG lines, because now there's a revenue source that they can get to. Whereas before they were entirely reliant on state programs. I mean, a lot of people don't think they're worth it yet. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's good to be careful and it's good, you're covering both smaller DG batteries, distributed batteries, and the big stuff, because I'm guessing they're coming at some point. Yeah, and this is standard. I like this. It's a, if you have a really good battery and you like it, it's in a good spot, it's helping a farmer, it gives you the right, or the planning board the right to waive some of the requirements, just so it doesn't have to be so draconian with stuff you really like. And this one of the states had put this in, I think it was Mass, and I like it. I think they should tell you if the owner changes. They're going to change a lot. And I think it's important that they let the town know every single time there's an ownership change. But yeah, so if you'll see in my comments, we've got some fine tuning to do on this, but I would say, from our perspective, if you could really think about sizing, tiers, in particular, where and what zones you want to. I think we've all said tier 1 should probably be a P or whatever it is in the code, permitted as of right in every zone, but like tier 2s might be N somewhere, might be Ps, might be site plan review, might be a CUP in an R1 zone. You got to kind of figure out that.
Yeah,
And
Mark, do you want to take a stab at filling in the table,
Yeah, let me talk to our planning department.
given your knowledge, and then we'll discuss it and sort of all agree at our next meeting?
Yep, that sounds good.
my guess is, and I don't quite know the process, but I'm guessing this will, get vetted by a lawyer, and then it probably is going to go to a public hearing, and you'll probably have to tweak. That's where, people are going to be like, I don't want a battery in the R1 zone. Like, I don't care if it's tier 1, you're going to have to deal with all that. But
So for that, Kurt, the way our ordinance is anytime a zoning code change comes to town meeting, it first has to get a recommendation from planning board.
okay,
So kind of what I would probably envision as a practical matter is once this group, with input from staff and the committee and interested citizens that want to help us out, once it feels comfortable that they like their draft, the next step would be take it to the planning board kind of for comment and get their input. Or if you want it earlier in the process, we could involve them early in the process, but to get that kind of incorporated. And then once they feel good about it too, then we'd have a public hearing in front of the planning board and take public comment at that point and stuff. So.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I said we're happy to, once we get this really shored up and presentable, maybe by the next meeting, it might be in good enough shape to share with the planning board. But I said we were on break, so now I have Josie and Antonio back. So
Well, I just have to say this is great. I think this is much further along than where we had gotten to. I think it covers so many of the bases. I think we've had a really great discussion today. So I'm very, very happy and very appreciative of the work. This feels way more than 50% to me, but I think it's
I just,
looking
my way
awesome.
of drafting is I throw notes in and then I organize it later. And I'm like, sometimes it comes out choppy. That's why I'm like, it's not done. We will make it pretty at some point. But
I want to second what Stephanie said. This is terrific. And your expertise is obvious, and it's nice that you kind of know, here's the things you got to look at, here's the other places are. And
yeah, and honestly, that's the fun part about this is the state officials are good and they're smart and they've got good hearts, but they don't understand what a developer will do. They look, and it's not, I would say it's not unethical. They're just being crafty, and they will look at, again, like if you said, oh, you're abandoned, we haven't seen anybody on site or all the machines have been flashing red for 180 days, you're abandoned. They might be like, no, we moved power out one of those days, you just missed it. So, we got to catch them before they pull that crap. And then again, the financial surety, it's a big issue. I don't know. I mean, hopefully these things are going to be around for a while and they're going to change hands. And if somebody goes bankrupt, somebody's going to buy them, like solar. Like you never see solar getting decommissioned just because somebody else is more than willing to come in and fix it and buy it. But there might be a day when that's not the case. So we just got to be really careful about that financial surety and what that looks like. But
I keep reading about sodium ion batteries. Are those A, easier to recycle, B, less flammable, or are there advantages that would help with those? Or?
I don't know. We've had a bunch of people come to the clinic and talk to us about the different long durational technologies, but none of them, they all feel like high school science projects still. It's like we need tons of solar to power a portion of the battery that's going to be stored in sand created brick-like things. And you're like, so you need like 50 acres to produce a 100 megawatt hour battery. And it's like 3 times more expensive than lithium ion. It's like all of the technologies we hear about seem to be far off. Hopefully we'll get there where you can have a battery on your house and it can power your house for a week. Right now, though, the only way that can happen is if you just buy more batteries, which nobody can afford because they're expensive anyway. So like none of this stuff deals with long durational batteries. And I don't know if sodium ion is one of those or if it's just a substitute for lithium ion, but I mean, we should, I'll make a note. We should just generally try to understand if there are other types of batteries on the market that are going to come to market pretty soon that might require another, level of review. Like the containment, like I don't want to scroll down again, but and again, if I were the planning board, my first hire would be like, we're hiring a third-party consultant to look at your safety provisions. Like that's a done. But they talk about secondary containment. And my understanding is the battery is going to be on a cement pad and the secondary containment is largely a little cement wall, around the battery so that if it leaks, it gets contained on site. But then I'm like, I don't know enough. I'm like, how does that work with rain? How do you know if it rains and it's full and the battery leaks, well, how does that work? Like, is it remotely monitored? Like, we got to kind of figure that stuff out too. And whether that might be different for like a different type of battery, So we should figure that stuff out too, just to be super thorough.
Yeah, or maybe it could be more generic language, like there needs to be safety features that prevent hazardous materials from contaminating the environment in the case of a leak or storm water or whatever, and just
yeah, you know
say
what?
you need to tell us what's required for this particular technology in this particular location and how it's going to protect us. And then, yeah, the town will be hiring our own expert to validate what the
Yeah, and you know
developer
what?
says.
You know what? Now that you're saying all that, you know what? And again, a lawyer might shoot all this down and be like, you can't be this vague. But I would like to see some language, and we'll add it, and we'll let them strike it down. But that not only like the noise that says you have to do a noise study, but we also have the right to make you do another one anytime during operations. How about if we don't think their safety standards are up to par after like a 10-year period where we've learned a lot more, that there's some right to go back in and make them do better, or if they've had an accident and it leaked, there's something in the bylaw that gives the planning board the continuing right to force them to upgrade their, environmental health and safety procedures. Can't hurt to ask,
Right.
The problem is if you don't put it in there, they might be like, well, look at the permit. We did exactly what's in the permit. You can't make us do anything else,
Mm.
And that happens a lot,
So, and we don't think any of that's covered in the ULs or NFPAs or National Electric Code as far as monitoring and.
I don't know. We'll have to dig into that. That's a
Yeah.
good point. I don't know. I don't, it's usually not covered well enough in local town zoning codes. And part of it, there is a concept of like, and I don't know how far we can push it, but you can't be, I'll probably use the wrong term, but like unconstitutionally vague in a zoning bylaw. You gotta give them some concrete things to hit. So if you say, hey, listen, at any time we could make you put in a $500,000 safety thing, they might be like, you can't do that. You gotta give, Or they might, if you put in, the lawyer, the good land use, Maine educated land use lawyer will know how to word it, but you've got to kind of give them some concrete things to shoot for, unless it becomes like, as I said, I forget the term, if it's unconstitutionally vague or not, but I'd rather put it in and have the lawyer upon review say you've got to be more precise, than not put it in.
Be good to have in there. All your standards are gonna update every 3 years, but they're also gonna allow grandfathering as they update. So anything that's an issue is continuing to be an issue.
Right. And it's already installed, will be grandfathered.
Right. And typically, unless there's like some sort of an imminent threat or something that they'll move forward with the standard and then grandfather what's existing.
Yeah, and we might be able to, or we could amend it, say if they have us. We'll work on it. We'll work on the language, or legitimate safety concern triggers the need to upgrade. We have, the planning board's got the right. We'll figure out a way to kind of make it less vague. And when's your next meeting?
It is September 15th at
Okay.
the same time, 4:30 p.m.
Okay, I only have, I don't, what we'll do is, since we've got the hard part, I only have an hour that night because I have another meeting at 5:30, but what we'll do now that we've got like the initial draft done, we'll try to get you something well in advance, maybe even a couple weeks in advance of that meeting, so you can look at it and, get us back any comments. And so the meeting, we might get everything we need to get done in like an hour.
That sounds great. Energy committee folks, Mark, Jeff, were there public, were there any other last items on the battery ordinance topic?
Not that I have.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think we managed to go through most of it, which is great.
Yeah, and we'll read it. We skipped some of the stuff, but it's the important stuff is obviously what we talked about in terms of sizing and where you want them. But and again, we will go through your site plan review, and your site plan review section seemed very, very thorough, which is good. So we just want to make sure we don't duplicate anything, just be as professional as possible, and leave stuff out we don't have to have in there. Or yeah, or do we keep it there anyway in case they modify site plan review someday? We still have. Yeah, we'll have to
I think if it's important, it doesn't hurt to be redundant.
Yes, that's a good point. But if we keep, we talk about topography with 2-foot topo lines, like that's in there. We don't need to double up, So anyway, that's a big part of what Antonio and Josie will do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We appreciate it. And we look forward to email exchange in the interim and then seeing you on the 15th of September.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Next item of old business, invasive plant session next Tuesday. Are there any last details we need to discuss about making sure that session is successful? What time do we need to arrive, etc.?
I can tell you that I have been in touch with Andrew and asked him if there was anything else he needed, like handouts or anything that we could provide, and he said he was fine. So in terms of the program itself, I think we're all set.
I think consider that.
Okay, and then have you told Andrew that he will need to, the easiest thing will be for him to just bring his own laptop?
I will be sure to tell him that.
And if you decided
That's right, Jeff. Like he'll just call into the Zoom and you'll promote him to be a panelist
At the next meeting?
at the invasive plants educational session on next Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let me, sorry, I admittedly was half paying attention. I was looking something up. So
that's
tell
okay.
me again- Tell me again what you need.
We have an educational session in the town hall meeting room next Tuesday
Oh,
evening, and
yeah.
I was just letting Jackie know that we should tell our speaker, our guest speaker, that he should bring his own laptop with his presentation on it, right? Because that's how you guys prefer to do it, where they join the Zoom.
Yeah, and if they could be here maybe 10 minutes early, we could go through the whole thing with them and make sure there's no
Okay,
issues.
yep,
All right.
got it.
Jackie, Stephanie, when do you anticipate arriving?
Maybe I'll get there like half an hour early, just in case.
Okay.
I can be there whenever people think I should be there. I live right down the street.
I mean, I don't think that there's really any other setup.
Probably not.
Great.
All right. Okay, spreading the word. So I put together a poster location document so that for future postering, we have like a list of all the places, and I put in a note about how it usually works at each place.
Yep.
Let's see, Carl, you had shared the updated language for the Energy Committee webinars page, which we're renaming to Outreach page. And so I think, Mark, is it that you were the one that would be updating that with the new content?
Yeah, I need to do that. I haven't done it yet, but I will do it.
Okay, but you have everything you need at this point, you think?
If I don't, I'll reach out to Carl again. But-
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to let me know if anything does make sense.
All right, and then maybe if by the next committee meeting that page is updated, we can finalize the social media post, Carl, that you've drafted and get that sent to Pam for her to put on the town Facebook page.
Sure.
And Carl, you shared that you created a template. So we have a template for our social media and crier posts going forward. I don't think we have any planned upcoming announcements aside from that updated web page that we'll announce once that's ready.
We could potentially do one following
After.
basic species.
Oh
or
yeah,
basic
that's right.
Yeah.
Just to say, here's the recording, we had this, and blah, blah, blah. You
Right.
can go to the webinar page to take a look at it or whatever.
Yeah, does someone want to volunteer to draft that so that we could review it at our next meeting?
I can do that.
Awesome.
Is a
That was
template,
Jack. That was
Is-
Jack who said that.
are you okay with using the template, Google template, or would you like to draft it up and email and send it to Stephanie and or I to take a look at?
I think that would probably be the most efficient way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to plug content in to the template.
Great.
Just email it.
I'm happy to provide the content. So we're good.
Okay, sounds good. And then creating the poster template, I looked in Canva and I can share a link to it that allows I think the person that I've given the link to edit, or I can add access to individuals, but I don't know that I can like save a template in our Google Drive. So if everyone's okay with it, maybe for now, we just sort of leave it there, and depending on who's drafting posters in the future, I can make sure that they have what they need to get access, or I can continue to put posters together. I'm happy either way.
Could you explain what Canva is, Stephanie? I'm not familiar with that.
It is a web-based design application, and I've like made business cards through there. I haven't used it a lot, but you can mock up posters. They have a whole bunch of pre-made templates. So that's what I actually ended up using. And I just sort of adapted it for our purposes.
Great.
And they have a free tier. So I don't pay for it. I just use the free
Yep.
tier. But I can create the QR codes through them too.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. And then I don't think we necessarily need to review the schedule of announcements. We just discussed that we'll do the updated webinar outreach
Yeah.
page, and we'll do the learnings, takeaways from the
Right.
invasive plants. But we'll review those at the next meeting.
Right.
And then Nick isn't there, right? In the room?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
I
absent.
didn't hear from him. Last meeting, he told me in advance that his mom had some health issues, so he couldn't make it, but I didn't even hear from him this time. So I'll text him and see what's going on. But the last agenda item was if he had any updates on the
Yeah.
solar education session.
On the membership note, I just spoke to Mr. Joyce on his way out, and I said, if you're really interested, there's still openings on this committee. And he said, he might be, think about it. I said, or if it's just the topic of the ordinance, you're welcome to just come to the meetings for that if you'd like, because it can't hurt to have the input of a power engineer.
Yeah, I thought he had some great contributions.
So I think at a minimum, it sounds like he's interested in that. So he may possibly apply for the committee, but I think he'll be at our next meeting anyway to talk about the ordinance. So.
And could
Okay.
I have his name again, please?
John Joyce Jr.
Okay.
And last name is Joyce. Well, actually, a similar name Joyce. Yeah, makes it easy.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any new business? Okay. Jackie, do you have a little list of who's agreed to do what? I don't think it's too long.
No, it isn't. Mark's going to be putting up the new material from that Carl has drafted.
And getting the planning board input, it's not at the planning board, the planning department input on the zones and the types of the tiers. So.
Oh, okay.
And then Jackie, you said that you would draft
I will draft the
content for the next
content.
crier or social media post about
Right.
invasive plants.
Right. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So we have our invasive plants program Tuesday, August 25th at 6 p.m. in the town hall meeting room, and we have our next energy committee meeting on September 15th.
Yes.
Let's see. I can't remember. Do we have to move to adjourn or just adjourn?
Generally,
Whatever you want.
we have generally just been adjourning, so I think that's fine.
All right. I adjourn the meeting.
And it is 5:59.